This show is part of the Pod Tyrant Network. For more podcasts, interviews, and content, visit podtyrant.com.
All right, welcome to another episode of Alternative Facts, where we bring you a bunch of alternatives to the fax machine. Joining me, as always, is my good friend and telecommunications fan, Ben Pearson. How you doing, Ben?
Hey, Tyler. How are you?
Pretty good. We are speaking via Skype over a computer, which are two great alternatives to the fax machine.
Yes.
But the episode today isn't about those telecommunicative wonders. Today we're talking about the telephone, Ben. The telephone. Ever heard of it? Have you seen this thing?
Yeah, I have heard of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is a telecommunications device that permits two or more users to conduct a conversation when they're too far apart to hear, like by yelling. It's typically converting sound and most efficiently the human voice into electronic signals suitable via cables over long distances and replays signals simultaneously in audible form to its users. So very much so like a fax machine, it does send information over a long distance. However, as opposed to the fax machine, which can only send what? Text? Maybe a picture or somebody's butt. You can actually send audio, maybe even live, a voice via the telephone. Ben, do you have any other thoughts on the telephone?
Yeah, it's this crazy thing. This guy, Scottish immigrant, Alexander Graham Bell, the first to be granted a U.S. patent for this device way back in 1876, and he was certainly a pioneer. The telephone. It's no fax machine, Tyler. That's why we're talking about. The telephone on alternative fax, but. Right. But yeah, it's certainly no fax machine, but it definitely has its good things, it has its bad things. I feel like the telephone as a communications device has sort of come and gone. It's seen its peak and has declined rapidly.
Yes.
Nobody really calls anyone anymore. It is now 2017, so everyone just has sort of reverted to the text aspect and the butt pictures, as you mentioned, with the fax. So I'm personally just waiting for the fax to go back on the rise. These things seem to come in waves. There seems to be a lot of ups and downs and peaks and valleys. So I feel like the fax machine is in a little bit of a valley right now, but the telephone was at a pretty surging peak, and now I would say it's down in a valley. So we'll see if the fax machine goes back on the rise. What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, a lot of people are concerned that faxes wouldn't even be around. Like the fax machine wouldn't even be around without the telephone. But I challenge you this. Let's say the toner needs to be changed, right? Mm-hmm. So how are you going to communicate with your clients? Let's say you're the government, a business, maybe even a household, and you're trying to communicate with a customer or a friend, and the fax machine toner needs to be replaced. I would just suggest to simply move over to the telephone line, pick up that handheld device, and speak into it, and it definitely communicates what you need right away, almost instantaneously via sound waves, via electrical signals. Back in 1963, of course, AT&T started to do a push-button dial, which is, of course, revolutionary, as most telephones up until the 70s used a rotary dial. Thankfully, though, the fax machine never did feature a rotary dial. It did have push-button dials, but again, sometimes those buttons will fall off, or they will not push the right number, and your fax is sent elsewhere. But the telephone, pretty reliable piece of equipment, and I think all you really need to do is go to the store. If it ever breaks down, you go to the store, maybe $5-10, you can buy a new telephone, just plug it right into the wall. Ben, have we convinced you that the telephone is a great alternative to the fax?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the government earlier, and it seems like our current administration really is not a big fan of the fax. I think they are definitely in search of alternates to the fax, and I think that's really what we're here to do, is provide alternate fax, different sorts of means of communication that are not a fax machine. So I feel like we're doing our part, serving our country well, and I think we've done some justice to the telephone here today.
Sure, and the telephone, of course, it comes in many shapes and sizes, much like people of the world. It can display photographs these days. You can surf with it excuse me, surf the internet. That makes more sense.
Okay.
But
yeah.
I'm sure there are some waterproof phones out there that you could easily surf with and communicate with your friends. Can you imagine? Ben, can you imagine a surfer with a fax machine on the back of his board? I mean, it's just ridiculous.
It doesn't even really make sense. I don't know how they're not like plugged into a landline. I don't know how you would send the signal. Yeah, crazy.
So a great alternative for surfers, I mean, I know it's a niche audience, but a great alternative would be a phone of sorts. A telephone. Yeah. So we thank you, Mr. Graham Bell. Thank you for immigrating here from Scotland and patenting that back in 1876. And if you'd like to hear more about the telephone and alternative to fax, you can check out its Wikipedia page, wikipedia.org/wiki/telephone. You can, of course, email us about other alternatives to the fax machine with our email, another great alternative to the fax.
Yeah,
and that's our email address is podtyrant@geektyrant.com, and you can find all kinds of alternatives to your favorite podcasts, and maybe add those to some of your favorites at podtyrant.com. Ben, as always, I turn to you to see what kind of alternative methods our listeners would like to contact you with.
Yeah, I don't really have a fax machine at my apartment these days,
I don't own a fax either.
Yeah, as an alternate to the fax, you can hit me up on Twitter at Ben Pears, and that's probably the best place to track me down. You can listen to a bunch of the other cool shows that we have on podtyrant.com, as Tyler mentioned. You can listen to our show, the Not Just New Movies podcast. That's on there. And I would just encourage everyone to let us know what you think about this episode of the show, whether you think we should keep it going, and mention maybe we'll do a whole episode devoted to Twitter or to email, as you mentioned before, Tyler. There's all sorts of alternatives to the fax, and we're here as long as the listeners want it to talk about all of them. So we'll see what sort of feedback we get. Tyler, in the meantime, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, you can find me at fax number 866-555-3769. You can send me any information that way via fax.
Okay. Great stuff.
I don't use a lot of alternatives. That's kind of why I started this show, to just learn more about the alternatives to the fax machine. As you mentioned, it's kind of fallen out of favor, so I'm having a lot of hard times communicating with people. But hopefully, this show will take off, and I'll start my journey to interacting with human beings once again.
Sounds good.
Until then, we'll see you next time on The Alternative Facts.